Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this beautiful morning. I think it's beautiful because it's cold. It's my favorite weather. Thingamajig. No. Thank you. So, for those of you that are new, my name is Master Thích, a junior monk here. So today we are doing walking meditation. I think a lot of people have been waiting for it. So have I. I was just holding off because I wanted the weather to be like this. So now I'm really warm because I'm wearing like long johns and I'm layered. The robe is really heavy, so I'm like warming up. I'm like, hurry up, let's go outside. But anyway, so walking meditation. Walking meditation is for Luke. What are you doing? Walking meditation is something that we typically do with regular sitting meditation. If we're doing like a formal meditation session, you would typically do walking kind of in the middle of sitting. So if you're doing a long period of sitting meditation, kind of halfway through, you would get up and do a walking meditation, just kind of move your body and get things flowing again. Or it's done after sitting meditation. So just depending on how you feel comfortable doing or how you want to practice it, that's typically what's done. So usually for us, if you come to like our Tuesday classes, or if you have any retreats, we typically do them. We typically do sitting first and then walking. But I usually try, if I'm doing a longer session, I try to do walking just to kind of get my blood flowing, because that kind of wakes you up a little bit also. But walking meditation is pretty important. The Buddha did teach us that we can attain pretty high realizations just from walking meditation alone. Walking meditation, the main difference from walking meditation is our object of meditation. So if we're sitting, typically our object of meditation is our breath, right? So whether we're counting our breath or feeling sensations of our breath as we're sitting or breathing, those are the objects as you sit. But for walking meditation, our object is mainly the focus and the feelings of our feet. So we're being mindful of our steps. We're being mindful of how we walk, of how we step and move and place our feet on the ground. So today we'll go over some of the, one of the most common ways of practice, which is easy. Usually if you come to our Tuesday class, Alice is a class, we'll discuss just right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, which is okay to do. But for me, I add an extra step in there. So it's lifting, moving, and placing. So as you lift your foot, you're making a mental note that you're lifting. And as you're moving your foot, you say moving, then you place your foot and you place. And then usually when we're walking, one of our feet is already moving or starting to lift before our foot's completely flat on the ground. The other foot's completely flat on the ground. But in walking meditation, since we're doing it slower, you do want to make sure that your foot is completely placed flat on the ground before you start lifting your second foot. And then typically when you do walk, you want to walk in a equal step. So you don't want to take a few large steps and a few short steps. Typically, we won't go this low, but usually if you're doing walking meditation, you want to place one foot right on top of the other, and that's pretty much your pace. That's a pretty slow pace, like really slow, right? So if you have time to do that, then you can do that. But we'll just kind of attempt to walk normally, slower than usual, but we'll just take normal equal steps, right? Avoid long steps, avoid steps if you're trying to catch up or slow down from someone. Avoid those types of steps. Just walk normally and kind of keep pace, right? If you all take kind of equal steps together, then we'll pretty much be equal spaces apart. for the most part. So you don't have to worry about catching up or getting too close to someone. But it'll be easier. I think it's easier to do it outside than inside because we have a smaller space here. So it's not as easy to have a normal pace, especially if you're trying to step over the vents or shoes or cushions. Once we're outside, hopefully, our path will pretty much be down the garden, into the parking lot, through the parking lot, down that pathway and around that statue, the big standing statue. And we'll go around that a few times and come back in. So that'll be our path, and since it's a straight, flat path, it's easier, and that's typically what you want to do when you are doing walking meditation. You want to try to have the flat surface as possible. You want to have a long path. Usually in Buddhist temples, you'll see in their garden somewhere just one long pathway, right? And that's typically where people go up and down. You just go up and down walking meditation. Sometimes it's in a circle. But the most common, most traditional is just a straight path back and forth. So we'll have plenty of room to do that. Just be sure that we're taking equal steps. That's just the most important part. And then of course, just remind yourself that you're lifting, moving, and placing, right? And after that, there's a fourth step that you can add, which is shifting. So you're lifting your foot, you're moving your foot, you're placing your foot, and then you're shifting the weight to your other foot, right? So that's the extra step. So I would probably just have you all start just with the lifting, moving, and placing steps, the 3 steps there. Or if you want it simpler, just say right, left, right, whatever is easiest for you. But just do try to stay mindful on the foot, right? You're trying to be mindful of the present. I think there's construction happening outside because I don't know if they're here. Are they here yet? They're here. So we'll have some of that distraction going on. So don't allow that to distract you from your walking. Just try to stay focused because we have a moving object of meditation. It'll be easier, right? Because typically if we're sitting and we're just counting our breath, it kind of gets too routine and we kind of get used to it and we kind of flow off into Never Land, right? But since we're walking, we have a moving object, it's easier to stay focused and it's easier to stay concentrated on our feet. So again, I will try to keep pace not too slow, but just a little bit slower than a normal pace. That way it gives you the practice to make those mental notes as you're walking. So most of you, if you don't have, I only have one more. If you want to pass on to the gentleman, I know not, I'll give you one later. And then I added a pretty advanced notations on here for the moving. And so it kind of consists of, I think it's on the last page, that's the second paragraph on the bottom, where I've added 3 extra steps to 3 of the main steps, right? So the paragraph reads, the first part of lifting is where the heel and the middle part of your foot leave the ground. The second part is where the ball of the foot comes up. And the third is when the toes break contact with the ground. That's for the first 3 of the first lifting part. And then for moving is when the foot rises vertically in the air. The second part is when it moves forward horizontally. And the third part is when it's lowered towards the ground. And then the last step for placing is where the toes and ball of the foot make contact. The second part is where the rest of the foot makes contact. And the third is in the shifting of the weight onto the other foot. So we go from 3 to 4 to 9 steps, right? So 9 is kind of a little out there and it takes way more concentration. I think for that is where you really do have to make very slow movements and steps. But we won't go that far. We'll just stick to the 3 or the 4 steps. So whichever is going to be easier for you, whether it's lifting, moving, placing, or lifting, moving, placing, and shifting. Got that way, Noah? Lifting, moving, and placing. So as we're walking, I was mentioning earlier, as we're walking, we're making slower steps. We're going to be walking slower than usual. Most commonly, you want to be walking foot in front of foot like that. That's a very, very slow pace, but we won't go that slow. Only because it's probably too cold to do that right now. But we'll just walk at a normal, slower than normal pace. But as you're walking, your mindfulness, you're concentrating on the movements of your feet, right? So you're making mental notes of when you're lifting your foot, when you're moving your foot, and when you're placing your foot. And just be sure that when you're doing that, that your foot is entirely flat before you start moving your second foot. And then again, those are your moving objects of meditation. If for any reason you get distracted or the sounds or just the construction, I don't hear them too much going on right now, but if the construction does get too loud or just something happens that distracts you, just bring your attention back to your feet, right? Your feet is your object of meditation this time. You also don't want, like with sitting meditation, you want to keep your head up high and looking around, right? So as we're walking, kind of keep your head low a little bit. Not too low where you can't completely see the space and area in front of you, but low enough where you're not really looking around, getting distracted. And then for the placements of hands, it's really up to you. You can either just keep them on your side, hold them like you normally would with sitting, or palm and palm, whatever's going to be most comfortable for you. You just don't want to be kind of doing this or doing this, right? So for whatever is going to make comfortable for you, you want to do that. But just remember, because I always tend to forget, I always start looking around and I'm like squirrel, right? Just make sure that your attention is a little bit in front of you. We'll keep probably 2 or 3 feet in between all of us. That way your attention is mostly focused on the person's feet in front of you. You're not looking at their feet, you're looking kind of the space right behind it, right? Because you don't want to be mindful of their steps. You want to be mindful of your own steps. So you don't want to just pay attention to their feet, but you want to just see the area right behind them, just so you can see the ground and see where they are in front of you. So you're not running into them, or you're not stepping on something or tripping over something. That's pretty much the gist, really, of walking meditation. I kept it pretty simple because as you practice and as you advance, the advancement naturally comes with it. Like with sitting meditation and concentrating on your breath or whatever else you're concentrating on, it requires a practice. It requires the commitment to do it and to hopefully master it. And the same thing with walking, right? You would think walking is pretty standard, right? It's just a natural thing we do. But what we tend to mostly do is go on an autopilot, right? We just kind of leave the house, walk to our car, we go to work. We're not really being mindful of what we're doing. So the point of walking meditation is to be mindful of your surroundings, to be mindful of the movements of your feet, to be mindful of how your body feels, of how your feet feel as you're touching the earth, as you're walking over certain surfaces, right? So after a while, your next step can be how your feet feel on the ground. Are you walking hard concrete? Are you walking on soft earth? Are you walking on sand, right? You're feeling, the whole point is to feel how your feet feels on the surface or as it moves, right? So you can kind of advance little steps like that as you go on. But right now you just want to be completely mindful of the lifting, moving, and placing portion of walking. So it's not too difficult, but it's also not entirely easy either, as you'll probably notice as we start walking. After a while, the distractions will come as normal. You'll drift off into Tomorrowland or whatever, right? But when that does happen, just remind yourself to come back to the present moment, and to focus back on your walking, on your feet. So again, I'll just follow lead. Do keep a few feet of distance in between everyone. Don't try to, if you are kind of drifting off from the person in front of you, don't try to catch up. Just keep your normal pace. And again, we'll just go down the parking lot and around the statue a few times and come back in. So I'm thinking it'll take about 20 minutes or so. Yes. Yeah.
Question. So if my first step is my left foot, and my left foot, should my left foot be completely planted before my right heel comes up?
Correct.
That's unnatural. That's unnatural to the way we walk.
Right, because typically when we're walking,
we're kind of rocking forward, and
right,
this heel's coming up as that.
Exactly. Exactly. So you want to so since we're walking slower, it'll be easier to do that as a completely place before the next foot lifts. Because yeah, if we walk normally, we're kind of, I don't know why I'm doing this, but we're kind of like both our feet are moving at the same time, right? But when we're doing walk meditation, specifically, one foot is your object of meditation. And once it's placed, you're shifting to the other foot, and that's your object meditation, and you kind of go back and forth. Shh, we'll be outside, honey. We'll wear shoes.
Everybody except you.
Right. Since you asked the question, you have to go barefoot. Any other questions before we get started? Concerns, emotional outbursts? I don't believe it's an extremely cold, so I think we'll survive. But for any reason it's too cold for you, feel free to step away and come back inside or stand in the sun somewhere. It's very sunny, and we'll be outside in the sun, so that'll hopefully warm you up. But if we have no questions, we'll go ahead and ready to go outside.